addition, you have index cards and pens on your table. We want you to write questions for the candidates. I don't think you have to hear them first. You know what the issues are and you know what concerns you. So Heidi will come around to tables and collect them, and then Arlene and Maureen are going to take them out in the reception area while the candidates are speaking, sort through them, and pick the 6 best. Then we will have the candidates answer in 1 minute the same question, starting with this position, the second question starting with the second position, and so on. Oh, good, we're getting some candidates up here. Okay, good. Here they are. This is the show, folks. Awesome. Awesome. Hi, I'll introduce them in just a minute, but if you would stand if you're able, we will pledge allegiance to our flag. Run, Dave, run. Oh, you are running, I forgot. I pledge allegiance to the flag Thank you. And you might notice this is still our president. I miss him so much.
How you doing, Brian?
Thank you.
Thank you. I asked about you as well.
Yes. Oh, okay.
That's what I was told.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm always getting advice, Rebecca. Okay, if you aren't already a member of this club, we invite you to join the biggest and best Democratic club in Orange County. This year we are getting close to 400 members, and we only need about 12 more to make that 400, which would be a huge milestone for us, and I'm so proud of this club and our directors and our members. Thank you so, so much for making this club so successful. We have some great candidates with us tonight, and I'm going to briefly introduce them. They have declared their intention to run against Congressmember Mimi Walters. Yes, in our 45th Congressional District. They're seated on the stage in random order, which was determined by a drawing of names conducted earlier. Starting from the podium side, here's a candidate many of you already know, Ron Vereste. Next to him is Brian Ford. Then there's Kia Hamadan and Dave Mann and Kati Porter. And finally, Eric Walski. Thank you for coming, Eric. You made it. Okay. I don't know if you can tell, but we're supposedly being videotaped by our own Channel 6 television. It will be shown 3 times on our, it's not closed circuit, but it's just our own Channel 6 here in the village. And I will make sure to send the Globe the dates and times that it will be broadcast. And every once in a while, Channel 6 likes to edit it and put it on YouTube. So it might end up on YouTube. We would tell you that too. Okay, here. Yes. Sorry. Heidi's going to keep circulating, and raise your hand while we're doing this if you have a card already filled out. She'll come and get it. Thank you. We have 3 announcements tonight, just a little bit of club business. And the first is this coming Friday, 2 days from now at 5 o'clock at the corner of Paseo de Valencia and Del Toro in front of Chase Bank, our own Laguna Woods Resist is having a protest. 2 of their members aren't able to make it. It's vacation time. They really need bodies to show up out there. So if you have nothing else to do and it's not too hot, maybe you could show up in the corner of El Toro and Paseo de Valencia this coming Friday at 5 o'clock. These flyers for Resist are on a table out there in the reception area. On Saturday, September 16, our club is having its annual brunch, which is our major fundraiser of the year. And our special guest is California's Treasurer John Chung. Please pronounce it Chung and not Chang. Okay, thank you. Who is himself running for governor next year. His talk is titled, Taking a Different Road for California. We were lucky enough to have John Chung visit us in 2011 when he was California's controller. Of course, now he's treasurer. He's really one of the good guys working hard to represent the residents of our great state. The brunch features a delicious family-style meal served at your table by Yolanda, our caterer for the last decade. We've never used anybody else. She's fabulous. We will serve mimosas for a small donation going to South County Outreach, the club's primary service project for 7 years. And thank you to those who brought food for South County Outreach tonight. Appreciate it very, very much. And here's our service project coordinator, Sue Snyder, right here. And she and her husband, Richard, have done a fabulous job of coordinating food drives. Oh, money? If you didn't bring food, Sue says, we'll take money. Thank you so much. At our picnic in July, we got 14 backpacks filled with school supplies and $114, which was donated to South County Outreach for their back-to-school thing. So thank you, everybody who participated in that. That's awesome. We're going to have a terrific silent auction with valuable and interesting items, and we still need some things for that. So please see Special Events Chair Penny Klein. Where are you, Penny? She might be out in reception. Okay. Or me, if you have something that you'd like to donate. And there are flyers on the table in the reception area, and you can sign up for our brunch 2 ways. One is through Act Blue, and on the flyer is the Act Blue website. You can pay with a credit card. Or you can take the flyer and complete the bottom part of the flyer and make your checkout and send it to us per the directions on the flyer. Then just 1 short week later, there she is. The Democratic Party of Orange County is holding their major fundraiser 1 week after ours, okay, which is the annual Harry S. Truman Awards dinner, and I'm very, very happy to present the chair of the DPOC, Fran Cedillo, to tell you all about it. Fran.
Well, I have the very difficult task of following in the footsteps of the great Linda Nearing, who had chaired this event for the last several years. We are incredibly excited about our Truman Awards dinner this year because our guest speaker is Congressman Keith Ellis from Minnesota, who happens to be the deputy chair of the Democratic National Committee. So he will be in town talking to us. But just as important, we award someone very special our Truman Award. And this year, our Truman Award is going to a Democrat who has been under attack by the Republican Party of California, and that is State Senator Josh Newman from the Senate District 29 up in Fullerton. And for those of you who don't know, Josh was elected last November by not a great majority, but by enough to get him up to Sacramento. He served, I guess it was like in March. He voted to support the Democratic Party at the request of Governor Brown. Josh voted along with most of the Senate Democrats and a few Republicans to support the gas tax, which will bring jobs to California, which will bring road improvements, infrastructure improvements to our bridges, to roads. The Republicans didn't like that because he voted for a tax increase, and Carl DeMaio, a guy from San Diego, initiated a recall immediately. There are millions and millions of dollars being spent on this recall, dollars that could put teachers in our classrooms, money in resources for families and kids. So we are fighting it, and it is our true honor to be able to recognize Josh with our Truman Award. We are also very honored to award our Lifetime Achievement Award to someone who is actually in this room this evening and sitting right here in front of me, the former mayor and city councilwoman in the city of Irvine, Ms. Beth Crum. So it is, Beth, stand up. She's short, but that red hair gives her away. You can see her a mile away. It is a fun evening. We have always a special signature cocktail. We, again, copied after your club here. You always have your fabulous drinks, so we, again, copied after Linda, so we have a signature cocktail. Our theme is Orange is the New Blue, because we are turning Orange County blue. So it is on our website. I have a few flyers here. I know you already have 2 tables of folks coming up. Please see me or go on ocdemocrats.org for info. We have a real celebrity. We'll have protesters, the whole thing. So it should be a real fun, exciting evening. So thank you.
Stay right here, Fran. Unless I'm really wrong, you have a birthday this month. No, come back here. 29. She's 29 again, folks. And this is just a little something from Laguna Woods Democratic Club, because we honor you and we think you're an awesome chair, and it's about time there was a woman chair at the DPOC. All right. Okay. Incidentally, Laguna Woods Democratic Club purchased 2 tables at the Truman already, and we still have 2 places left at our second table. So in case you're interested to sit at our table, please email me or see me later for more information. Here's the way tonight's program will work. Seating assignments were determined by a raffle drawing, just, the way it came out. So the candidate in the first position closest to the podium will speak first for 7 minutes. And our timer is our Vice President, Ann Pearson. Please keep an eye on her, and when she says you're through, trust me, you're through, because I will take the microphone out of your hand. Sorry, but you know how politicians are, right? Okay. And continuing down the table, each candidate in turn will speak for 7 minutes. So far as question and answer, as I said, write your questions on those index cards, raise your hands, and Heidi will bring them around. And Arlene and Maureen will choose 6 wonderful questions, and they will start question number 1 here, question number 2 will start there, and everybody gets the same question and 1 minute to answer. And Ann is also your timer for that. Okay. I think we're just moving right along here. So anyway, this is a really fantastic group of candidates that we have. I've met most of them on a personal basis and had a chance to talk to them. And thanks to the Orange Man in the White House for stirring up the forces for good. And let's get a Democrat in that congressional office next year. Of course, yep, good, okay. Of course, come primary time next year, we hope that your numbers have diminished somewhat, as we don't want to split the vote and wind up with no Democrat in the general election. We can tell you horror stories, but we know you already know them, right? Okay. And as Dan Jacobson, who's the head of the Democratic Foundation of Orange County, has pleaded, let's not have any negative campaigning, okay? And I don't think that any of these candidates will do anything like that. That concludes this portion. So now I'm going, nope, sorry, I'm ahead of myself. It's time for the candidates to speak. And the first one I'm going to call up, and Anne is going to time 7 minutes, would be Ron Vereste.
Thank you, Linda. Good evening. My name is Ron Vereste, and I'm running to be your next U.S. representative for the 45th District. I'm a scientist, I'm an engineer, and I'm a small business owner. I've been a small business owner for over 30 years. So if you're a Republican, you might appreciate that I create jobs and I pay taxes. And if you're not, you understand where it's coming from. My business is in artificial intelligence and telecommunications. I was one of the early inventors of voicemail system and call center systems. So those of you who hate voicemail, don't blame me, it's the way the world is going. So I was one of the early, I've been an Orange County resident for 35 years. I'm the chair of Irvine Democrats, president of West Orange County Democrats. I'm a state and county Democratic Party Central Committee member since 2011. Mimi and I have a history together. I ran against her last year. I was endorsed by the Democratic Party and nominated to run against Mimi in the general election last year. We received over 129,000 votes. That's more votes than any Democrat from any U.S. congressional district in Orange County's history. We were about 26,000 votes short out of 312,000 total votes. We were outspent 40-1. I'm not saying we need to raise more than her, but I think if we had raised only 1/4 of what she had raised, we would have been able to beat her. That's how close it becomes, these elections. And we saw the numbers. We saw the numbers get closer and closer in all of our polling that we did. A little history about me. My great-grandpa started the People's Party in Kurdistan. He had a price on his head to the last day of his life. My grandpa was exiled by the British government for speaking out for the people. My father supported a people's candidate running for prime minister. He became a political prisoner at the worst prison in Iran. So it's in my DNA. My father, my grandpa, my great-grandpa all fought for the people. So I'm paying it forward. As a first-generation Iranian American, I suffered firsthand prejudice and bigotry, especially during the Iran hostage crisis of '79. That was the worst year of my life. I was only 15 years old, and those people who called themselves my friends were no longer my friends. They broke my nose, they burnt me with cigarettes, they vandalized my car, they vandalized our home. This is why I'm here fighting against hate, and we all know who I'm talking about. I was the first to declare my candidacy against Representative Walters in February of this year. I'm running because I believe in people over party. I've volunteered thousands of hours over the last 8 years, organizing to inform the public of how corrupt our government has become in putting corporations over people. I've been fighting and marching for workers' rights, for the middle class, and against oligarchy. I will fight for the environment because climate change is real. I will fight for attainable college education because it is a human right. I will fight for single-payer health care because Medicare for all is a human right. I will fight for seniors because Social Security and Medicare are not entitlements. I will fight for women's rights, equal pay for equal work, and a women's right to choose. I will fight for veterans. They don't deserve to be homeless in the streets. I will fight for small businesses and jobs. We need to restore the middle class. Mimi Walters has not and will not fight for us. Mimi speaks for her big donors. We must stop our race to the bottom. I am not for sale, and I will not take donations from corporations. Our campaign is grassroots-driven and people-funded. I can only say so much within a few minutes up here. I'll be around until about 9 o'clock, either in this room or outside. Come talk to me. Get to know me better. You can also reach me at ronforyou.com. Ron, the number 4, the letter U.com. We're hosting multitudes of town halls and meetings, and we'll post them at our website. Unlike Mimi Walters, I wish to represent all of us, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents. Unlike Mimi Walters, I will have town halls regularly. Unlike Mimi Walters, I will fight to get more federal funding for our district. I will be your voice, I will fight for you, and I will win for you. When I say people, you say power. People. Power. People. Power. People. Power. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. Next, we have Brian Ford. Ready, timers?
Hello. I want to start by thanking the Laguna Woods Democratic Club for hosting this wonderful forum. I know that you are the hardest working Democratic activists in the county with the highest voter turnout. You can applaud that. And I truly appreciate your dedication to help fight in this race and for our country's future. Now, I had the opportunity to address you at a picnic several weeks ago, and I appreciated the opportunity. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak with you again today. Now, I want to recognize that many of you have candidate fatigue, and I want to let you know that I did not take the decision to step into this race lightly. With all of my heart, I know that from my unique background and experience, I'm the best candidate to serve this community's needs and where the country is going. And I look forward to serving you with that dedication and with that honor. Now, some of you might have heard that I was a registered Republican, and that is true. However, like many kids in Orange County, I grew up in a Republican home. My parents moved here when they were 40 years ago. And my dad started a real estate appraisal company. And I looked up to my parents as an only child. But as children do, they take different paths. And my path was to the Democratic Party, a party that fights for the freedom to choose who you love, the freedom to have health care access, affordable health care access, pro-choice, the fight for civil rights, ensuring equal pay. Those are the things that I have been fighting for throughout my life. Those are the things that I'll continue to fight for. Now, we all have different skills and different tool sets to make that fight. For me, that fight is fought with technology. I've always wanted to use technology to help others. In fact, when I was young, I asked my father for a computer. He said, "I won't buy you a computer, but I'll buy you the parts." And like any mischievous, curious kid, I went and bought the hard drive and the motherboard and started to figure out how to build that computer. And it wasn't this magical gray box. It was something I understood, and it gave me the courage. It gave me the courage to go to Irvine Valley College and take an intro to computers and networking when I was still in high school. It gave me the courage to take 10 or 12 more courses at UC Irvine in interactive multimedia while I was in high school. It gave me the courage to start my first company while I was in high school to serve other small business owners like my father. But I've always wanted to serve people with technology, and so after I graduated from UCLA, I joined the Peace Corps. I know there's some proud returned Peace Corps volunteers in here as well. It was great to meet you, and we talk about how you come back, and it's actually you're never a former Peace Corps volunteer, you're a returned Peace Corps volunteer, because that experience changes you for your life. And it changed my life as well. I was a high school teacher there, and I also helped set up a computer lab for the World Bank. But at the same time, I also saw how our immigration policies tear families apart, and I wanted to do something about it. I couldn't change immigration policy, but I could start a company, a phone company, where we put up 80-foot internet towers in rural villages to bring low-cost telephony and internet service to the rural poor, to save them 90% on their phone calls throughout the country, so that they could better communicate to their families abroad in the United States. Now, I didn't know that would be the beginning of my journey to serve others. I got the opportunity to serve as a senior advisor in President Obama's White House. And in that White House, I got the opportunity to go to the Situation Room in the wake of Hurricane Sandy, work with the President's cabinet to figure out how to use technology to increase access to housing. Look at how we could use mobile technology to ensure that everyone understood the wage gap and figure out how we could address it. Fight for the Affordable Care Act, and also the last thing that I did was try and address the 500,000 open IT jobs that we have in this country by starting an initiative called Tech Hire that set up coding boot camps outside of San Francisco and New York, and today is in 70 communities across this country. Thousands of people who had barely any computer skills had the opportunity to now have a job in the computer sector, one of the most growing, fastest sectors, not only across this country, but also in this community. But our economy is changing. Today, nearly 35%, or more than a third of our workforce, no longer works for a company, but they work for themselves. Yet our policies are based on people receiving health care, people receiving retirement from their employers. But that's no longer how it works, no longer how it will work. 3 to 4 million people will lose their jobs over the next 10 years due to autonomous vehicles. It'll help people get around who come immobile, but it'll also be a big job killer. So we have to figure out how we have the smartest policies to be able to address this rocky road that we're about to face. And so one of the things that we need to think about is while we're worried about Trump, technology will have a bigger impact over the next 10 years on our economy, on our society, on our values, on our civil rights, than anything that Trump can do. And only 4% of the people in Congress have a technical background. I'm running because the toughest challenges that we're facing are in my field, and I'm ready to fight for that. I'm running because more than 50 years ago, we had a president ready to send someone to the moon, and today we have a president who's trying to reestablish coal by 2020. Even the coal miners know that that game's up. More than 1,000 of them applied for the same coding boot camps that I set up when I was in the White House for 50 slots. They know that that's the next economy. So I want to leave you with a quote from Thomas Jefferson that's more relevant today than ever. And that is, I am not an advocate for frequent changes in laws and constitutions, but laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the progress of the human mind. And I promise you, over the next 10 years, the human mind will change and our abilities will change because of technology faster than we've ever seen in this room. And so I'm running because we need to take America back to take it to the future. Because when you look into your children's and your grandchildren's eyes and you realize that that future is actually today.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Anne. Are we ready? The next candidate is Kia Hamadan.
Good evening, everybody. I want to thank the Laguna Woods Club for hosting us, and I want to thank everyone for being here tonight to come see us speak. I also want to thank my parents for being here to support me, as they have my entire life, and I wouldn't be able to do this without their support. My name is Kia Hamadan. I am one of the many candidates running against Mimi Walters. I tell people Kia like the car, because easy to remember. And when they say that you don't have any name recognition, I say, actually, I have quite a bit of name recognition. You just need to get to associate with Kia, the candidate for Congress, not Kia, the car company. I was born and raised right here in Orange County, in Irvine. Attended Irvine public schools my entire life. And as many of you know, they're some of the best public schools of anywhere in America. And I think about that a lot because I went to college at the University of Michigan, and I ended up having my roommate that I was assigned with to randomly was from Detroit. And a lot of people say they're from Detroit, but really they mean the suburbs, which are fairly wealthy. He was from Detroit. And he used to tell a lot of stories about what it was like to go to school in Detroit public schools, which, you know, unfortunately are not where they should be. And it was a dramatically different experience from what I had experienced. And it made me think time and time again how fortunate I was to have grown up here in Orange County, how fortunate I was, all the opportunities that I was handed based by virtue of where I was born, and the idea that every single child in this country should have the same opportunities that I did. And that is what instilled in me a desire to go into public service and to fight to make sure that's the case. And so when I graduated from law school, I went to work for one of the greatest senators this country's ever had, a man named Tom Harkin, a person who told me when you asked him why he was a Democrat, because he would tell you that it's because the moral test of government is how it treats those in the dawn of life, the children, the twilight of life, the elderly, and the shadows of life, the sick, the needy, and the handicapped. And those are exactly the kind of things I fought for when I worked for Tom. Those are exactly the kind of things I want to fight for as a member of Congress. And after Tom Harkin retired, I went to work for Sherrod Brown, who's another great senator, who goes out there each and every day and fights for working people in this country. Someone asked me once, do you think that his brand of politics works in Orange County? He's from Ohio, it's populist, and I said, you know what, I don't care where in America you are, it's never bad politics to fight for working people. That's something the Democratic Party has forgotten, but I never will. I'd like to talk about my experience because it's a very specific kind of job that all of us are trying to run for. We are running to be legislators, to represent this community in Congress, to be advocates for this community, to actually get this job done. And that's something I have 6 years of experience in. It's more experience than Mimi Walters has. It's more experience than Donald Trump has. And it shows. We have an amateur in the White House, and right now more than ever, we need people who are experienced in Congress to hold him in check, to hold him accountable, and to change the direction of this country. We don't value experience the way we used to, and that's how you end up with Donald Trump as president. But the most important thing when you're deciding who you want to be your next member of Congress is who you're going to trust to go there and be able to get the job done from day one. Who's going to be able to build that track record in their first term in Congress to make sure that they can get reelected and they've done what they can for this community. But I'll also tell you, it's the right kind of experience. It's the appreciation of the fact that there is something fundamentally wrong with our government, because you do not get Donald Trump as president of the United States if that's not the case. Even if you impeached Donald Trump tomorrow, our government still would be fundamentally broken and in need of change. And that's what I want to fight for. We need someone not to just go there and be one of 435 members. We need someone to go there and fiercely represent this community and be a leader in the Democratic Party and be a leader in changing the direction of this country. And that is what I believe I can do. I decided to run for Congress because of the travel ban. I can remember speaking to my mother that night and her talking to me, her asking me that whether she should sell her house and move to Canada because it's not the first time she's had to leave a country because the government changed. And there's something wrong with that, because this is a country that was built by immigrants, for immigrants, where no one should feel like they're a second-class citizen, no matter where they're born or where they're from, and that's not what Donald Trump represents. That's not what Donald Trump stands for. And I decided for me, that was a call to action. But not just for my community, but for every single community in this country, because the first thing I thought of that night is who might be next. And we need to fight to protect every single American, because who knows who Donald Trump might come for next. And that was my call to action. And I'll close with one last story that kind of will tell you all what I'm all about in a sense of why I'm running. When you run for Congress, people tell you all kinds of things. They have all kinds of advice. And one of the things I've heard time and time again from lots of people, including members of Congress, is that you need to change your name. That a person with the name Kia Hamadan can never be elected to anything, let alone Congress. And you can see why they say that. Sometimes when we get articles posted, people write all kinds of comments. He's going to establish the caliphate. He wants to behead everybody, deport him. I'm not really sure where to. Go back to where you came from. I tell them, well, that's what I'm doing. And I tell people who tell me that I will never, ever, ever change my name. And I reject that logic in a country where Barack Hussein Obama was twice elected president of the United States. My name is very much the reason why I'm running for Congress, because there's not a child in this country who should grow up and feel like there's anything they can't do because of what their name is, where their parents were born, or what religion they practice. And that's what I will fight for in Congress. And I'm asking all of you here to join me in that fight. Thank you.
Good timers. Thank you so much down there. Next candidate, Dave Mann.
Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you to the Laguna Woods Democratic Club. As Brian mentioned, you all are amazing. We know you're amazing. You're the reason that we're going to win next in 2018. I also want to thank the fellow candidates for showing up tonight. It is wonderful to see all the energy and passion from these folks. I know personally what a sacrifice it is, and I appreciate the sacrifice that everyone up here is making. So I'm Dave Mann. I think I've met many of you, but for those of you who don't know me, I'm a law professor at UC Irvine. My wife Jane, who's in the audience tonight, is also a law professor. We live and work in Irvine. It's where we have our 3 young children. I want to tell you a little bit about who I am, but more importantly, why I'm running. Finally, I want to describe a little bit about why I'm the candidate who's going to beat Mimi Walters, because we really can't invest in our future, which is part of my platform, and have the future that we want unless we get Mimi Walters and Donald Trump out of there. So I'm a native Californian who went out east for college and law school. I went to the University of Pennsylvania, where I studied economics at the Wharton School of Philosophy in the college. Went off to law school at Harvard. I met my wife Jane there. That was probably the smartest thing I did there. I also want to tell you a little bit about a decision I made that I think is relevant here because it indicates a little bit about who I am. So I was trying to decide what to do after law school. I was deciding between going to Goldman Sachs and going to the Securities and Exchange Commission and protecting investors. Now, that was a tougher decision than it may sound like today because everyone at the time told me I should go to Goldman Sachs. It was the cream of the crop of Wall Street. This was before Wall Street was seen as a bad thing. My parents were telling me I should go to Goldman Sachs. But after a lot of soul searching, I went with my heart and went to the SEC. I was literally the only person in my year, the 2 years preceding it from Harvard, to go to the SEC. A little something after I chose that job and between then and when I started happened. It was called Enron and WorldCom. So it ended up being a pretty nice place to go. But that was really the beginning of a career of public service for me. I've since served on Capitol Hill for Senator Schumer, for the Joint Economic Committee of Congress. I served as a senior policy advisor at the Center for American Progress, the leading Democratic side think tank in Washington. And I'm currently at UC Irvine, where my wife and I have been for the last 5+ years. In all these capacities, I've had a similar portfolio: economic policy, housing, banking, financial regulation. But none of that is why I'm here today. I'm here up on this podium for the same reason that you all are packing this room on a Wednesday night, and that's because of the election of Donald Trump. I think that is a day that will forever sear my own memory. It's a story for me that I'll remember the rest of my life. I remember waking up that morning with a sense of promise. I mean, it was the most exciting day I'd remembered in a long time. Hillary Clinton was going to be the first woman president, and my 4.5-year-old daughter was going to grow up with a female role model running this country, someone who was honorable, dignified, and experienced, in contrast to the person that she was running against. And just like a generation of people grew up thinking it was normal to have an African American as their president running this country, I was ecstatic about the idea that my daughter would have that role model as president of the United States. I remember just being full of glee that day. I remember my wife and my daughter dressing up in matching pantsuits and taking photos and posting them on social media. I remember just that anticipation all day, waiting for the election results to start coming in. And of course, when they came in later that evening, we had an election party, just starting to feel that excitement turn to concern, turn to despondency. And I remember going to bed just fundamentally at sea, wondering what country I was going to bed in. This was a country that I thought I knew, that I loved with all my heart, and it was a country that voted for Donald Trump as president. And of course, all the concerns that we had about Donald Trump were validated when he took office. We saw that with the travel ban. Like Kia, that was the day I decided that we needed to take massive action. To me, that's completely un-American and unacceptable, an assault on core American values. I am the son of Korean immigrants. My parents came over here in 1972. They came here to study. They decided to settle down. They had me in 1976 in graduate school in Providence, Rhode Island. They had my brother a few years later. They settled down in California, which is where I grew up. And I think a lot these days as a father of 3 young kids about that choice to invest in a country that is not your own, a culture that is foreign to you, a language you don't know that well. That is the ultimate love of country. They love the United States so much they're willing to spend not only their lives, but their future kids' lives in this country. And that is why the travel ban felt so contradictory to everything I thought this country stood for. And that was the day I decided we had to take massive action, which ended up somehow with me running for Congress. Now, that being said, I think that we can't just be against Donald Trump. I disagree with 99.9% of what Donald Trump stands for. I'm told he likes cats. I like cats. But you can't just run against Trump. You have to stand for something positive. For me, that is something I call the dad agenda. The dad agenda is about investing in the future, investing in the types of long-term priorities that we used to in this country. Things that return better value long run, make a better future for our kids, establish the foundations for the American dream for our kids and beyond. And that means education, environmental protection, infrastructure, science, research, housing, and yes, healthcare. Now, I live in this district, I work in this district, I'm raising my kids in this district. I think it's tremendously important that we create a better future for our kids. To do that, we need to oust Mimi Walters. And here's how we're gonna do it. You all know the demographics of this district. You know it's more than 25% Asian. You know it's trending younger. It's more educated, more democratic. But it's still Republican leaning. We're still facing an uphill battle. But here's how this campaign is gonna win. Going back now, I appreciate all the stuff about future technology. That's an important thing that we have to face. But we also need to get back to good old-fashioned retail politics, face-to-face politics. I'm told that I am unique in this country in that our campaign has had more voter contact than any challenger on the Democratic side in this country. We've met more than 10,000 voters. We've done about 75 events. We've done 2 town halls. We're doing a 3rd town hall at the end of August, August 30th in Anaheim Hills. And the theme of our campaign is something we call 2 Degrees of Dave Mann. We want everyone in this district, by the end of this campaign, to know someone who's met me personally. Now, that's not just a strategy for winning, although I think it is a strategy for winning. It's a strategy for representing you, because I can't represent you as your congressman if I don't listen to you, if I don't hear you, if I don't know your concerns, your values, what keeps you up at night. 2 degrees also means that you need to get involved. You're now all within 1 degree of Dave Mann. I need your support to get out there, talk to your friends, your neighbors, even the Republican ones, get outside your comfort zone just like I'm doing. At the end of the day, this campaign is not about me. It's about all of us in this room and in this community trying to create a better future for our kids and beyond. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry. Our next candidate is Kati Porter.
I'm Kati Porter. It's wonderful to be back here in Laguna Woods in such a spirited and strong community. I want to tell you a little bit about who I am and what I've spent my career doing. I'm an Irvine mom of 3 young kids who I fervently hope are 7 minutes from going to bed. But I've spent my career as a consumer advocate. And what that means is I've spent almost 20 years fighting big banks on behalf of families. And that is exactly why I'm running for this seat. That is exactly what I want to do in Washington, is fight for our families and for our communities. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I got to where I am. So I started my career studying how the powerful financial institutions that run our economy interact with everyday people like us. And I saw and learned how those big banks cheat families to make a buck or $1 billion. And after a few years of doing this work, I'd built a strong reputation. And I got a phone call one day, and it really changed the course of my life. The phone call was from a lawyer, and she said, "I'd like to tell you about my client." My client's name is Pearl Maxwell, and she's an 80-year-old woman, and she is terrified that she's going to lose the house that she's lived in for decades. She'd been sold a fraudulent mortgage by a door-to-door salesman, and a few years later, a big Wall Street bank was threatening to foreclose. And that bank, it had lied to Pearl at every turn. It told Pearl that she owed them $264,000. Her annual income was about $18,000. But 7 days later, that wasn't enough for the bank. It wanted $363,000. The bank told Pearl that she had to sell her furniture in order to pay them. And worst of all, that bank threatened over and over again to foreclose, even though its own records showed it knew it was breaking the law in trying to do so. And that lawyer said, I know you've worked on a lot of these cases and these issues. I have a question for you. Is Pearl just the unluckiest consumer in America? Or is this really how big banks treat people? From my work, I had seen thousands of Pearls. and I told that lawyer the truth. Our political system lets powerful special interests get away with breaking the law. Back then, Wall Street had built its business model off of cheating families like us. But our leaders in Washington, and most of us, trusted that the banks would follow the rules. But that conversation I had with Pearl's lawyer, that gave me a new resolve. I wanted to build an ironclad case against the banks and take it public. And that is exactly what I did. I caught the banks red-handed, thousands of times, cheating families, people just like us. And when I started talking about what I had found about the Wall Street banks and their law-breaking, at first, a lot of people didn't believe me. But as the housing crisis started to hit and devastate our communities, people started to listen. But those people who had the most power to help us, our leaders in Washington, they still weren't listening. In 2012, I continued my consumer work at University of California, Irvine as a law professor, and I got a phone call one day from Kamala Harris. And she had just signed a record-breaking settlement with the nation's 5 largest banks, and they had promised to do billions to help the families that they had wronged during the financial crisis. And Kamala asked me to be the watchdog for all of you, for all of California, and to hold the bank's feet to the fire. And she told me, you and I both know those banks. They are going to do everything in their power to break the promises that they just made. And that's exactly what they did. And I fought them every step of the way, year after year. So we caught banks lying to homeowners, and we forced those banks to cut checks to make it right. We caught banks who illegally foreclosed on families and put them on the street. And we forced the banks to put those families and those children back in their homes. But sometimes, even though we won a lot of victories, $18 billion in relief for the homeowners in this state. Right here in Orange County, over 11,000 homeowners got help staying in their homes. And I'm very proud of that work. But part of my job was also to sometimes tell people the heartbreaking truth, that foreclosure was going to be the only way that they could move on. And I told those families the truth. Wall Street got its bailout in literally a matter of hours. And families waited years and years for help. And it was help that often never came. Families in this district, in the 45th district, are still feeling the consequences of those decisions. And I know that we are seeing history repeat itself. Fundamentally, our political system has not changed. Our leaders, especially my opponent, Mimi Walters, and her ally, Donald Trump, they always will put powerful special interests, people who are buying clout, ahead of our interests, ahead of us as families and our communities. And we see this in healthcare with Mimi Walters' plan to cut coverage for 24 million people. And I would fight to expand coverage and improve the cost of healthcare, make it more available and more affordable. We see it in Wall Street. Trump and Walters are trying to repeal rules that keep our economy from collapsing again. We need to fight for families, not for Wall Street. We see it with big oil and big coal, Walters and Trump repealing crucial clean air protections. We know that those protections are all that stand between us and our kids being sickened by pollution. And we see it with our freedom. Mimi Walters wants to take away our freedom to choose, to marry who we love, and to choose when to start our families. There's been a lot of talk the last couple weeks about repeal and replace. I think we've got to start with Mimi Walters. I want to repeal and replace Mimi with a Congresswoman who will fight for our families. Thank you so much for your support.
Next up, we have Eric Walski.
Hi there, everybody. My name's Wright Walski. First and foremost, thank you for your activism and for hosting us tonight. It is absolutely awesome. I also wanted to thank the candidates, just like Dave did. It takes some brave souls to be up here, some driven souls, and it's extremely important at this time in our nation's history for people to step up and truly fight district to district, coast to coast, because clearly there's just too much on the line for every single one of us. In a nutshell, who's Wright Walski? Why am I here? Why am I running? I guess you could say I'm your typical very nice guy next door, which I think is a very good asset to have in this race and any race across America. I'm originally from Ohio, the notorious swing state of Ohio, and I went to college at Miami University. It's not Harvard, it's not MIT, it's not Wharton, but it's a great, great university. I went to law school at the University of Toledo also, which may not be Harvard, it may not be MIT, it may not be Wharton, but I think in that is also something very important and marketable to voters. We have some extremely sharp people up here, and it's impressive. But we also need to keep in mind that we need to reach an entire Democratic base. And we need to reach every single independent, and we need to reach millennials. And I truly believe I am the candidate to do that for a number of reasons. And first and foremost is very simple, and I think it applies to everybody in this room, and maybe more so to your children and to your grandkids. And that's just quite frankly having a family in this day and age with the current policies that are being enacted, because they are, quite frankly, evil. And every single candidate has hit upon this. They are not putting citizens' interests first, period. And it's absolutely nauseating to me. On a daily basis, and I'm sure everybody can understand this, I hate watching the news, I hate reading the news, because it's actually getting worse. I had a certain opinion of this gentleman, well, this person coming into office, I'll say that politely, and it's gotten worse to the point now that we are having some challenges with North Korea and an insecure little man-child, an absolute buffoon in the White House, period. I'll call it how I see it. I'm a straight shooter. I was a lawyer in Chicago for a number of years, and actually I volunteered on his legal team in Ohio, and it actually worked for both campaigns. We won Ohio, we lawyered up Florida, and it's very important. So when the Q&A starts, you're gonna get some very straightforward, unfiltered answers from me, and I think that's really the most effective way to get things done, whether it's in a courtroom, whether it's volunteering, or in family relationships. A couple other things. We're all immigrants, period. Every single person in America for the most part. And I'm very proud of my family to share in that tradition. My family immigrated from Poland, Ireland, and Germany. And this was a number of years ago. My dad grew up on the south side of Toledo, Ohio, in an all-Polish neighborhood, extremely financially challenged, I could say that. And he taught himself English by the age of 10. And it was kind of entertaining. He's not a handy guy. I'll tell you that right now. I swear he still can't hang a picture. But his IQ is off the charts. And my grandma, his mom, always said, Bob, you've got to work with your mind when you're older, because you can't build anything. You're not a tradesman, you know. And man, can I attest to it. Some of the things he tried to build when I was younger, dangerous. But he did it. He put himself through school, met my mom. They got married. They had 4 kids. I am the youngest of 4 siblings. And just like many American families, they did everything they could to make ends meet for the kids. And I think they did it, and they did it successfully. And that's exactly where I am right now with my own family. Many of you met Kristen earlier, my beautiful, talented wife. She's actually an actress. If you've ever watched TV, I guarantee you've seen her in commercials. That's kind of entertaining. She has one right now. It's on HGTV. My mom texts me all the time. I'm like, okay, Mom, we have that also here. But it's really cute and nice. And just to kind of wrap things up here, relative to being the candidate who can beat Mimi Walters, that's the only thing that matters up here. I mean, we can all talk about our resumes till everybody's blue in the face. But the one thing that matters is who's going to flip this district, period. That's it. Who's going to beat her? And you got to look at the resumes. You got to look at everyone's family situations. You got to look at the district. You look at the demographics. And literally, when it comes down to it, and I think this is important, every policy is hitting home right now for my family and your family, everybody, across the board. And with our campaign right now, I believe I'm the Democratic candidate to maintain the entire base. These are the three things that have to happen. Maintain the entire Democratic voting base. Poll independent voters. Families just like mine who are fed up. We got to swing those votes, and we need millennials off their phones, in the voting booths, voting for Democrats. And that is the goal of our campaign. And things are playing out pretty smoothly so far, which I'm proud of. Lastly, I'll just wrap up real quick here. My father's clearly a big role model of mine. You may have seen some of my videos, campaign videos. But about 15 years ago, I asked him this question. It's always kind of stuck with me. I think it was during my law school years, and it's that point where your parents kind of become people to you, and your kids kind of are adults at this point. And I asked him, do you have any regrets? Anything? And he didn't really hesitate, and he was like, no, I don't have a one. And I was like, really? Nothing? Come on, you got to have something. And he thought about it again, and he said, I wish I took better care of my teeth. I mean, that was his answer, and I thought it was hilarious. I mean, first thing I thought was, if I'm at this point in my life and that's my only regret, I've had a great life. I was really, I thought it was hilarious. And then the other thing is, my dad has great teeth, by the way. He's just a perfectionist, which I thought was funny for the answer. But I've given this some thought. For me personally, do I have any regrets? And the one thing that has come up, quite frankly, is I've never served in the armed forces. I don't come from a military family, per se. My grandfather volunteered at the age of 33 to go and fight in World War II, but I've never served in the armed forces. What I have here in front of me, and so do these other candidates, is an opportunity to serve at the absolute highest level, applicable to my resume and my background. And I can tell all of you this right now, that when I'm given this opportunity, I will be absolutely honored, because it's service at the highest degree that I can now do. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
That's an amazing bunch of candidates. I need to acknowledge some people in the audience. You've already met Fran Cedillo. You've already met two-time former mayor of Irvine, Beth Crom. And next to her, please stand up, is Deborah Skurnick. And she is our brand new California Democratic Party Region 18 Director. She's already done meetings. She's doing a great job. She has not only part of Orange County, but part of San Diego County and part of Riverside. So she's really busy. Thank you, Deborah. Is there any elected here? Oh, Marty Rhodes. Marty, former Laguna Woods City Mayor, correct? Council member, yes. We have a great council here. Anyway, I've been handed, if there's nobody else, I don't want to not acknowledge somebody who's here who needs to be acknowledged. What a sea of faces. This is like 300 people. I'm impressed. Anyway, I've got the questions now. I'm going to ask them, and my timer, Ann, will give them 1 minute. And on the first question, we will start with Ron, and if you all want to just stay seated and pass the mic down, I think that might work the best. Okay. So the question is, providing health care has become a major issue. What kind of system do you favor, and what would you do to protect and strengthen Social Security and Medicare?
Okay, that's a loaded question. It's going to take me more than a minute to answer, but I'll do my best. The first thing is Medicare is one of the most efficiently run healthcare system in the United States. It runs with a 3% overhead. So if we had Medicare for all, we would solve all of these problems. No more workers' compensation, no more disability insurance, no more liability insurance. All of that would be waived for businesses. Businesses would do so much better knowing that the healthcare system is run like Medicare for all. As far as Social Security and Medicare is concerned, yes, there are some fixes that need to be done. My favorite fix is that we need to relook at the consumer price index. The way the numbers are calculated for seniors, they're not taking rent into account. They're taking the price of milk and eggs and that kind of stuff in the formula, and they don't have how much it costs to actually live and survive. So all of those things need to be relooked at, recalculated, and you will all get much better Social Security benefits because of that, because right now it's underfunded. So that's it for me.
Thank you. Next. And candidates, let me know if you want me to reread the question for you at any time.
I believe that every single American deserves the right to have access to affordable health care. Now, I also remember all of the pains that my colleagues went through to get ACA passed. And what we clearly just saw with the Republicans' attempt is how hard it is, even when they have consensus, to come to agreement. So even they couldn't come to agreement. And so I think we have some really great options on the table, from single payer and Medicare for all. And what I want to do is continue to look at all of these opportunities and see which is the best that we can politically get forward and get across the line to continue to focus on the rights that every person should have, which is that everyone should have equal access to affordable health care. And in addition to that, ensure, as someone who does have a pre-existing condition, that everyone does make sure that we have access to health care that prevents us from sorry, I'm having that moment, huh? I want to make sure that we ensure that everyone has access to health care, that if we're that if they have preventative, if they have issues that like I do with asthma, that we're ensured that everyone has access to that health care. Thank you.
Healthcare is a human right. No person in this country should ever go bankrupt because they lack access to healthcare. Every American deserves access to affordable healthcare options as they need it. And for me, the only way to ensure that is single payer. In terms of Medicare and Social Security, I think the first thing is we have to stand against the constant attacks by the Republican Party. And I can promise you that I will never, ever, ever vote for raising the retirement age for Social Security and Medicare, and I will fight tooth and nail to make sure that that never happens. And the third thing, as I think was one, we need to expand Social Security benefits. And the third, and for Medicare, we need to find a way to make sure it covers long-term care, because currently it doesn't actually. Thank you.
So as I mentioned, I've talked to well over 10,000 people in this district. I've talked to independents and moderate Republicans, and I'll tell you, everyone agrees on the same policy goals for health care. We want universal care, as Brian mentioned, at an affordable price. And that means coverage that covers all pre-existing conditions, covers everyone. And by affordable, we have to also include co-pays and prescription drugs. That has to be part of this along with premiums. So what do we have to do to get there? Single payer obviously works in many countries. We have a market-based system right now. How do we transition from our system right now to one that has universal care? The first thing we have to do is stop the Republican assaults on Medicare and Medicaid. By the way, the next thing they're going to try to assault this on is through the budget, $8.1 trillion in long-term cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. It's a full-out assault. So I want to make sure that when we talk about universal health care and getting there, we need to make sure we don't dilute Medicare. So I'm proposing 3 steps to get there. The first, in the near term, to help us get universal coverage. The first step is expanding Medicare down to age 55. That'll broaden the risk pools, improve the solvency of Medicare. The second step is opening up Medicare as a public option to shore up ACA in the exchanges. And the third step is expanding the Children's Health Insurance Program so that it covers more children of the working poor than it does today. I think those 3 steps in concert will get us to a universal coverage system and potentially also be a bridge to single payer if that's where we decide we want to go as a country. Thank you.
I think Medicare should be available to every American. Healthcare is a fundamental human right, and we need to make sure that we all have access to it. I agree with Dave about a public option that would allow people to buy into Medicare at any age. That's an Act Now step. Another Act Now step, something we could work on immediately, is lowering the age of Medicare from 55, starting at 55 and moving it down, expanding that system. The third thing we could do right now is take on big pharmaceutical companies and our skyrocketing costs of medicine. We pay the highest pharmaceutical costs in the world, and drug prices today are 40% of all healthcare costs, and nobody is gonna check them unless they're willing to fight those powerful special interests. That's what I wanna do. I don't wanna talk about Donald Trump's healthcare plan. You know why? It's not gonna make us healthy. There is nothing caring or compassionate about what that was. And it turned out there wasn't even a plan. So I want to fight to defend the Affordable Care Act and then work to make sure that Medicare is available to all of us.
Great loaded question. This covers a lot of territory. It's kind of nice coming last because a lot of the answers are already there, to be totally frank. First and foremost, there's a big transition. Single-payer Medicare is the goal. Hands down, I think that's almost universal up here. But we need to be realistic right now in the present is to shore up the Affordable Care Act. We have got to do that. A couple ways to do that. Strictly enforce individual mandate. We need more participants in there. Lower the participant age of Medicare down to 55 as well. And address pharmaceutical costs. It's absolutely insane right now. And this one hits home. My father has to get a monthly injection. The bill from the hospital for that is $26,000 starting per month. And during Obamacare and his administration, actually personal bankruptcies decreased by 50%. I'm not saying, and the research doesn't solely indicate that was because of the Affordable Care Act, but in large part it was. And it's very important. So we have to transition, shore up the Affordable Care Act, then go single payer, which is going to be a process. And then lastly, relative to Social Security, my parents are on it. They're on a fixed income. We need to address CPI, the Consumer Price Index, number one. That is absolutely imperative because that really increases Social Security and its longevity. And lastly, payroll tax as well. Increase the taxes, bring up the lowest ceiling, which I think is at $118,000 right now. We need to bring that up higher and get more taxes coming in.
Okay. Okay, we're going to do question number 2 and start with the second place, Brian Ford. And candidates, please closely watch Ann and the timing and try to stay within your time. Thank you. This one's kind of long. As you are doubtless aware, the United States spends far more on defense than any other country, And the president proposes to increase that while slashing human services and the budget of the State Department, et cetera. How would you address this problem? Brian.
Well, you're talking to a returned Peace Corps volunteer, someone who went out and served his country for $200 a month. So I think that was a pretty good, efficient use of our services. And the two things that I had to combat when I was a Peace Corps volunteer were two of the biggest issues that people thought Americans were George Bush and they thought they were Britney Spears. And yet we have 6,000 or 7,000 Peace Corps volunteers in 60 countries around this world who are changing the image of the Peace Corps and of America. And I think what's incredibly important is to make sure that we're reducing our defense budget and increasing the amount of money that we're spending on supporting others so that we don't have to get to the wars and the entanglements that we're getting into with a president who has a shorter fuse than some of the other dictators.
So our defense doctrine is based on this idea that we need to be able to fight 2.5 wars at any time. I think you got to start with, as the basis, that's a ridiculous notion. The United States is not going to be fighting 2.5 wars at any time, and we don't need to be spending military money like it is. The second thing is there's more waste in the military spending than almost any other area of government, and it has a lot to do based on who's in charge of what committee. So like if I'm the chairman of the committee, I'm from Alabama, and they build F-35s in Alabama, well, you're getting 50 F-35s even if the military only wants 10. And I think that we are too focused on the military at the expense of other things, and one of the biggest examples in Donald Trump is the fact that he's increasing the spending for the military while slashing the spending for the State Department and our diplomatic relations, and that's how you end up in a war because you haven't done the diplomatic work needed to avoid it. And so it's actually one of the most dangerous things he's doing.
So our defense spending right now is at the higher than at any time, including during the Cold War, on a real per capita basis. That's just wrong and stupid. We need to go back to the foreign policy that we used to have in this country. Speak softly, not tweet loudly, and carry a big stick. We've gotten away from that, and we cannot be in multiple wars at the same time. We need to reinvest in diplomacy and engagement and bring back soft power. We need people like our allies getting behind us again. We need to reinvest in diplomacy. North Korea right now is a perfect example of this. I don't know how many of you know this, but South Korea, we don't have an ambassador to South Korea right now under the Trump administration. Because of the brain drain in the State Department, we have 0 people right now that speak or read Korean. And yet we're about to potentially go down a very dangerous path with North Korea recklessly. So we need to bring sanity back to our foreign policy, reinvest in diplomacy. I think that we got to get back to the way that we used to do things. And so bring defense spending down. I don't know that we need more bombers, more wars out there right now. I think we ought to invest in the things that matter. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
I think we have to refocus our priorities on what is going to help our families and keep us safe. We need to do diplomacy and coalition building, and we need to lead with that, not with our fists, not with giveaways to the military, powerful special interests who want to take our money and spend it on themselves rather than on keeping our men and women who are serving us safe and in harm's way. I think there's plenty of room in the budget to invest in what matters to Orange County families, what we see right here in our own lives. Education, our strong public schools, and our secondary schools, our universities. Science and research, technology that's going to grow jobs and keep our place in the world as a leader in the United States. Infrastructure, that we have billions in unmet infrastructure needs. We need to focus on those things. On the revenue side, on the tax side, there are large corporations like Verizon that paid literally 0 in taxes year after year after year. We need to focus our expenditures and focus our budget, because that's what it is. It shouldn't be Trump's budget, it should be our budget. We need to focus on what we care about.
Relative to the United States military spending and our budgets, just to put it in perspective, clearly we are number 1 relative to that number. And the following 7 countries combined, we still spend more than and fight more for in these budgets. Relative to the budget, a budget is a reflection of the people and the person drafting it and their ethical code. And that's what we're looking at right now. This is what this administration is doing. We need to, and it comes from legislators and pretty much Democrats at this point, minimize this United States war machine because it is out of control and it is not slowing down. This shouldn't be talked about lightly. I'm sure there are plenty of veterans in this room, and we know plenty of veterans who have sacrificed their lives for American freedoms. They didn't sacrifice their lives for American business. And that's what has to be addressed by whoever is in this seat and in this office, is to get our ethical code back in order relative to this spending. And once that is done, we can apply it to more basically viable, important programs like healthcare.
Now, Ron.
Thank you. So military spending. I'm a businessman, and I look at numbers. I look at numbers all the time. And when you see that we spend more money on military than the next 35 countries combined, what are we getting ready for? A war with Mars, maybe? I mean, it's ridiculous. We spend too much money on defense. It has gotten bloated, fat, way too much wasted on things we will never use, things that we will certainly not use. And people usually say, well, Democrats want to cut military spending. It means it's going to hurt our soldiers, it's going to hurt our veterans. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying pay them well, have the veterans taken care of after they leave the military, but do not waste money on all those unnecessary weapons. We have weapons that we'll never use. We have enough nuclear weapons to destroy the planet multiple times. And so if you look at my flyer, it says diplomacy over war. That's exactly the route to take. We have to look for diplomatic ways to avoid war. So spend the money on infrastructure, science, and technology, and use that as a military spending like Eisenhower did.
Thank you. Now we'll start with Kia. And this question is, what is your position on gun safety?
I think we need to do more in this country when it comes to gun safety. You know, the United States is third in the world in terms of per capita guns per person. The next two countries are Saudi Arabia and Yemen. That's not a list that you want to be on. The idea that you can go into a store, a gun show, and buy a gun without a background check is absolutely ridiculous. The idea that you can buy an assault weapon in this country is absolutely ridiculous. And there are far too many people killed in this country because we make guns far too easy to have. The last point I would make is, the thing that people don't think about is the majority of gun deaths in this country are actually suicides. Because one, we make it really easy for people who have mental health problems to get a gun, something Mimi Walters actually voted in favor of in January of this year. And we don't do enough about that, and we don't do enough about mental health in this country, and we need to address both of them.
I agree with Kia. I think we need to start with reasonable gun control regulations in this country. The NRA needs to be, we need to start winning small victories and moving towards some reasonable regulations. Right now, Republicans like Mimi Walters, as Kia pointed out, are against even things like restricting access to guns for mental health patients. My wife, Jane, has actually written about the problem of domestic violence abusers having access to guns. And people like Mimi Walters have consistently voted against restrictions on domestic abusers having access to guns. We have to start with these basic steps. I think that at a very minimum, we ought to be regulating guns at least as much as we regulate automobiles and driver's licenses in this country. Let's start there, and then we can talk about where that line gets drawn. But we need to make sure that we're keeping these fatalities and preventing the preventable ones.
Families in this district, we know why common sense gun protections matter. We want our communities and our schools and our police officers, those who serve us, to stay safe. So I would fight to reenact a ban on assault weapons. We had one here. It's time to put it back in place. And I would fight to expand and strengthen background checks and make sure those background checks are actually enforced and doing what they're supposed to do to help keep us safe. Mimi Walters has a great voting record from the NRA, and it is time to shut that down and keep our children safe.
One of my buddies is a retired Navy SEAL, another one's an Army Ranger. And I talked to them about this. And I said, how do we do it? How do we get it done? We shouldn't have assault rifles out there, period. But how do we start minimizing? Of course, I'd love an all-out ban. But we also need to be realistic again. These things are going to take steps. I would love for us just to do that in Congress. But that pull and push is ineffective. So we have to find and meet somewhere in the middle. Relative to assault rifles, I want them banned. Who doesn't? It's absolutely lunacy that a U.S. citizen can go buy a military-grade weapon. But these guys advised me, you got to start with the cartridges, basically ammo. And they said, you need to limit high-capacity cartridges. That's where you start. And we were talking about mass shootings because it's just frustrating to see these on the news and their frequency. So they said, start there. That's where you start. And then you just keep pushing, and you will get to the ban. But do it slowly, do it gradually, and work with both sides, because that is a compromise people are going to listen to. And then other than that, we have to close the internet loophole and also the gun show loopholes, because anyone can just go there and buy them. It's absolutely absurd.
So the gun laws, we've had a Second Amendment in our Constitution from the day it was written. Hasn't been changed. The Supreme Court refuses to hear any Second Amendment cases. And so this is left back up to us. Let's admit it, most gun owners are decent, law-abiding citizens. It's this small percentage of the gun owners that are causing most of the trouble. And so instead of fighting to get guns out of the hands of everybody, we need to fight to get the guns out of the hands of the non-law-abiding citizens. And like the loophole for Saturday night specials, we want to get rid of the loophole. We want to have a cool-off period. Every state should have a cool-off period before someone can obtain a gun. And lastly, a background check should be mandatory. I've heard that in states like Pennsylvania, you can just walk in, buy a gun, and leave without any information given to the gun salesman. So to me, those are things that are like basic, decent stuff that we all thought we had, but it's not nationwide. and he needs to be nationwide.
I respect the rights of gun owners, but I promised to get an F from the NRA. I think we should ban assault weapons. I think we should make sure that we cover the gun show loopholes. I think we should also increase the importance of background checks and make sure that we enforce them so that we ensure that our communities continue to stay safe because it's not from terrorism. It happens to be from those people who are using guns to kill our people in so many of our innocent places, and we need to stop that immediately.
Thank you. Could you pass it to Dave? We're going to start with Dave. Question number 4. Probably none of us have witnessed a time when our country was as deeply divided as it is now. What hope do you see for reestablishing some degree of civility and cooperation in Congress and ideally in the larger society?
Well, look, I think it starts by discussion, right? We've become more polarized in our society. Republicans hang out with Republicans, Democrats hang out with Democrats. I do actually see some hope in the large percentage of independents or no party preference voters in our district. But one of the things that my campaign has tried to do is engage Republicans, even ones that we know will disagree with us, but especially the ones that we think might agree with us. And we've attracted quite a lot of independents and ex-Republicans to our campaign. And I think a big part of this is just going out and talking to people, listening to them. My answer to that divide is to try to be local. So people ask me, where do you stand in Washington? My answer is my goal is, and job is not to represent Washington, it's to represent this district, and that requires me to talk to people in my district and listen to them. And so that is a recurring theme of our campaign. It's part of the 2 Degrees of Dave Mann. It's getting out there, listening to people, including the Republicans. That is why Mimi Walters has done such a horrible job, in my opinion. She doesn't live here. She doesn't work here. She doesn't do town halls here. I will be different, and I'll listen to people. And by the way, I'll extend that same courtesy when I'm in Washington to Republicans on the other side of the aisle. That being said, I will not do a bad deal for the sake of doing a compromise. I'm all about bipartisan outreach, but it has to be a good deal for the people of my district.
Okay.
I believe that there is more that unites us as Americans than divides us. And we have a lot of control over how we talk to each other and how we talk across differences. So I'm trying to model that in my campaign. It was not easy to keep my temper and to be kind to bankers who were stealing homes out from underneath families. But I did it because you don't have to be rude or cruel to fight hard. I know how to fight hard for what we need, but do so in a way that shows fundamental respect for everyone as a human being. We, in this district, in my own work, year after year, I have seen that what really matters to families are issues that are not partisan. They are not partisan unless we let Donald Trump make them partisan. How are we going to send our children to college? How are we going to retire? How are we going to afford housing? These are issues that unite us, and that's what I've been talking about a lot in my campaign, and I'm seeing a great reaction talking about those issues that bring us together here in Orange County in the 45th.
Like I said earlier, I'm originally from the swing state of Ohio. Quite frankly, I know a lot of Republicans. For better, for worse, a lot of them. A lot of them are my good friends, they're family friends, and things are extremely divided right now. But we need communication, which many have hit on. We got to communicate with each other. And there have been some victories out of Washington relative to some bills passing, sanctions against Iran, North Korea, Russia. There has been some cooperation. So it's divided, but there's still things getting done. But obviously we have to put country over party, period. And relative to some of the extreme behaviors out there, I actually have some draft legislation. I worked on my own legislation relative to executive orders, immigration, and one of them actually comes to hate crime sentencing. And I want the sentences increased, and I want to minimize discretion of the courts, subtly and legally, because there are behaviors and things that happen right here in Orange County, District 45, District 48, that have got to be curbed legislatively.
So you guys know I'm a businessman, so I deal with Republicans. Most of my clients are Republicans. I have a business that's been around over 30 years because I work with them. And I know that once they know that you care about them, it doesn't matter what party you belong to, even though I have tried to change a few of them to re-register as Democrats. I do my best to, as I promised earlier today, I said, when I'm elected, I will represent all of us, Republicans, Democrats, and independents, that I will be in touch with you, unlike Mimi Walters, who pretends that she's having a tele-town hall meeting, and everyone's there on the tele, but you couldn't ask any questions. It was all up to the her own supporters that got to ask the questions. So that's what you're going to get from me, is someone who's already figured out a way to work with both sides of the aisle, a businessman with lots of experience, cooling down stressful level with the client. And it's the same with voters, and it's the same with congresspeople in Congress.
I remember the partisan hatred that was thrown at President Barack Obama every single day by Republicans, even when he proposed policies that were things that they had proposed previously. And one of the challenges I think, that you grow up, when you grow up a millennial, for example, we're the most diverse generation that's ever been. And so when you grow up, you don't have a choice to pick sides. You don't have a choice to pick labels. You don't call someone black or white. You don't call someone gay or straight. You don't call someone Republican or Democrat. You just are who you are, and you roll up your sleeves and you get things done. And I think one of the encouraging things that we have on this stage is we have a lot of younger candidates as well. And this is what we've grown up with. And so regardless of, whether you have a Democrat or a Republican label or gay or straight or black or white, whatever, we just roll up our sleeves and want to get things done. And I think there's going to be a tide of great young people who are going to be elected into Congress who will start to reignite a bipartisanship that will help lead to some of the solutions that we want to address.
So I think the first thing that we need to do is heal the division in the Democratic Party. We are deeply, deeply divided as a party. Unless we come together and unify, we're not going to beat Mimi Walters, we're not going to take back the House, and we're not going to take back the White House in 2020. But, I think that Donald Trump getting elected president is a symptom of what's wrong with our country. It's not the cause. And even if you got rid of him tomorrow, we still have deep underlying problems that we need to address as a country. And I think the answer is that we have this new generation of leadership who's now running for Congress. I think there's 25 people running for Congress in Orange County, and they're going to represent a different way of thinking, a different way of doing things that's really going to start to solve some of the division in our country, and I think that starts in November of 2018. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could give the microphone to Katie. And Katie, this is question number 5 for everybody. What do you plan to do, if anything, about global warming? And how can we protect the environment when Trump withdrew the U.S. from the Paris Climate Accords?
I think global warming is an existential threat. We know that here in California. We have seen what dirty air and dirty water looks like, and we have fought and spent and worked to clean our air and clean our water. Donald Trump is taking us back. California should be leading not just the United States, but the world on climate change. And the only way we're going to make meaningful progress on climate change is if the United States steps up and is a leader. I think we need to invest more in clean energy. Not only is it going to help us combat climate change, it's great for our jobs and our economy here in Orange County. And I'm deeply, deeply troubled by what Donald Trump is doing with the Environmental Protection Agency. He is turning our EPA into the CPA, the Coal and Petroleum Agency. And we need to stop him putting big oil executives in charge of the future of our world and climate change.
The next wave of leaders coming in Congress and the White House are going to have a lot of cleaning up to do and saving face. First and foremost is the Paris Climate Agreement. We have to go in there with our tails between our legs, in essence apologize, get involved immediately. Because only 2 other countries not involved in that is Syria, for obvious reasons, and Nicaragua, who basically did not join it because they didn't think the standards were high enough and nobody was going to be legally bound to them. That's leadership. I agree with their stance. We need to do that. And, Homeland Security is called climate change the #1 threat to basically human existence. Just a few weeks ago, the largest iceberg broke off of Antarctica. It was the size of Delaware and weighed over 1 trillion tons. That's real. There's no denying that anymore. So the naysayers need to open up their minds a little bit, because this is another issue where it's country over issue. This is a human race issue. And that's what I would do. I would immediately go back to the Paris Agreement. And California, quite frankly, is a forerunner and a leader in this industry. We should spread that east.
So we all know climate change is real. Anybody in this room thinks that it's not man-made? I didn't think so. Even some of the brightest Republicans are now coming out admitting that climate change is real. What's funny is just very recently, Mimi Walters came out and said she believes in climate change being man-made. So it's only because she sees that she could lose this job, so she better at least change some of her song and dance. You know, California is leading the nation. In fact, California is the 6th or 7th richest country in the world, and we set a very good example of how we should address climate change. As a scientist myself, I would join the science committee, and I would fight against those polluters that are polluting our air, our water, and on top of that, I would eliminate all their subsidies that the dirty energy industry is receiving right now. So my motto is to make them play fair on the playground and see if they can still make it against clean energies like solar and wind and other newer green technologies. That's it.
I had the honor of working with Dr. John Holdren, the President's Science Advisor, on the climate change work with President Obama. And one of the things that we did, and one of the things that I led, was the Climate Data Initiative. Climate data is incredibly important for all of us to have a record of what is happening and what is changing, for all of us to be aware of how it's going to impact all of our communities. We saw that firsthand with the impacts of the flood maps that changed as a result of Hurricane Sandy. And so one of the biggest fears that I have is that the EPA is starting to remove all of this data that is on their website that is inconsistent with the political beliefs of this administration. And so we need to ensure that we have consistent data throughout history and that it's not politicized. And we also need to fight towards getting to renewable energy across this country, because it's also one of our greatest economic drivers as well.
There are a few issues more pressing right now than climate change. If we don't take dramatic action immediately, we'll have a planet where our children and grandchildren literally will not be able to live here. When Donald Trump pulled us out of the Paris Climate Agreement, it was a terrible decision. But the Paris Climate Agreement wasn't enough. You know, the scientific community has set this target of 2 degrees of warming. Anything more than that is going to have unknowable effects. And there's not a country on the planet that is taking the steps necessary to meet that goal, to ensure that we stay below the 2 degrees of warming. And what that means is, as Americans, is one, we need to stand against Donald's constant attacks on the EPA. 2, we need to set a real price on carbon that's going to bring down our carbon emissions as a country. And 3, we need to demonstrate real moral leadership in the world to get China and India and every other carbon-emitting country in the world to actually do something about the problem, so we have a planet that our children can actually live on. Thank you.
Well, it's warming up in this room, which is why I took off my jacket and rolled up my sleeves. Time to get to work, right? I'm fundamentally a believer in science, and that is why the environmental protection is a top issue on my data agenda. I think we need to go far beyond the Paris Accord. I think we need to take affirmative steps to really rein in carbon emissions in our lifetime. The science is overwhelming. As Kia pointed out, we're facing large parts of currently that are habitable, that are going to be uninhabitable. Jane and I have solar panels that we installed last year. We got an electric car recently. But that's not enough. Individual action's not enough. We need pretty strong government intervention here. This is a classic tragedy of the commons issue in economics speak. We need more affirmative steps. Kathy Orlinsky from Citizens Climate Lobby is here, and she's proposed a strong proposal about carbon taxes. We also have cap and trade being proposed in California. I think we need to take strong steps because we want to make sure that our kids are going to have an inhabitable planet. They're going to have the same precious resources that we had growing up with. I want to leave that behind for them. I'm sure you do for your kids, your grandkids, your nephews and nieces. Thank you.
To Eric. This is the last question, question number 6. This is an extremely subjective question aimed just at you personally. In that we are ideologically aligned, what separates you from the other candidates and why?
Great question. Great question for every one of us up here. I hit on this earlier when I had the opportunity just to introduce myself. And quite frankly, relative to this district and this race, it truly is being that guy next door. It's being the most relatable candidate in this district and in this race. And not only do I have that, I have a resume that holds up as well. Quite frankly, and with all due respect, I don't necessarily think academic elites are going to be the answer. I really, really wonder about that. I'm very concerned about it. Mimi Walters is already attacking on those fronts very effectively. So that's what I have to offer, quite frankly, that no other candidate has.
So yes, what is it that's so special about me compared to the rest of them here? So I think we're going to have about 50 candidates by the end of the year. But for me, I look at it not just for the primary, but I look at it as a general election. How can we unseat Mimi Walters? What kind of a occupation should someone have to beat her and get some Republican votes? I think the most important thing that the Republicans would look at is that I'm a businessman, that I'm not just someone who wants to go get a job with the government and collect a paycheck, that I actually am a problem solver, being an engineer. So what sets me apart, I think, is the fact that I'm an engineer, problem solver, a businessman who knows how to get along with both sides, and I stand firm in what I believe in and do my very best to change their viewpoints, as I have daily when I talk to voters out in the streets. People need to know that this isn't me against you, you against me. This is all of us for America and what it is that's important in our country.
I was born and raised in Tustin. It's where I built my first computer, where I started my first company, and where I started my college education. My parents still live here on Red Hill and Walnut in Tustin. My 97-year-old Grandma Grace lives across from UC Irvine. My fiance, who's right back there, and I live in Lake Forest. And throughout my entire life, whether I was an entrepreneur, whether I was a Peace Corps volunteer, whether I was a policymaker, or whether I was an elite academic at MIT, I fought for solving challenges using technology to help everyone and make technology something that made sure that everyone had an equal shot. And over the next 10 years, the biggest impact on all of our lives in this room, in your grandchildren's lives as well, will be technology, and only 4% of people in Congress have a technical background, and we need to up our technical quotient to keep this country fighting for and being the leader of innovation across this world.
So the one thing that's going to differentiate me from everyone else on this stage is experience. With all due respect to everyone on this stage, they're incredibly smart, talented, but not one of them has the experience that I have in Washington, D.C. I was there for 6 years. I worked for 2 great members of Congress. I have a track record of getting things done that's going to demonstrate that I'm going to be able to Congress on day one, hire a staff, have a track record the first two years of my term. And it's the kind of experience for 2 strong progressive champions who both represent very ideologically in the middle places. Tom Harkin defeated more incumbent members of Congress than anyone in U.S. history, and that's in a state like Iowa is one of the biggest progressives ever. Sherrod Brown has won statewide 4 times in a state like Ohio, and it's Trump that won by 9 points as one of the strongest progressives in Congress. And those are going to be my role models for how I win this election and what kind of member of Congress I want to be. And Tom Harkin, who was here last week, had this great line where because he used to be a staffer, and he said, I was Kia once, and when I got to Congress, I was so far ahead of everybody else because I didn't need to be told where the bathroom is. And that's what makes me the best candidate on this stage.
I think there are three things that differentiate me and my campaign from the others on this stage, and I think they're all wonderful candidates doing a great job. First, I am this district. I look a lot like the new wave of people coming into this district. My wife and I think, are the embodiment of the type of swing voter that we're going to need to get. I think the data agenda appeals to the types of swing voters that we need to get to win this district. And we're doing the hard work, so that's the second reason. 2 degrees of Dave Mann, we're getting out there and meeting people. I don't think we're going to beat Mimi Walters doing a conventional campaign, which is basically wait till 8 weeks before the election and flood the airwaves with TV ads and send a bunch of mailers to you that you look at and throw away. I think we have to get out there and work hard, get face-to-face retail politics. We're doing that. We're not just talking about it. We're out there. Again, I've been told that we are more aggressive in that face-to-face politics than anyone in the country as far as Democratic challengers. So that's the second thing that differentiates us. The third thing is, look, when you look at who the swing voters are, they're basically parents, 35 to 50-year-olds in this district, and Asian Americans. I think our message, and frankly my ethnicity, is uniquely appealing to them. It's hard to imagine winning this district without getting the same types of turnout and the same types of swing voting from Republicans to Democratic candidates that happened in 2016 when you saw Asians and parents vote for Hillary Clinton en masse. I think I'm able to pull in those votes.
So I think the difference between me and the other candidates is pretty obvious. I am the only one on stage who cannot wait to get out of her high heels when this is over. In all seriousness, I have a real track record of fighting for families. A lot of people on this stage have worked for some wonderful Americans and wonderful public servants, and that is important work. But I have done the work on my own and gone toe-to-toe. I'm the one on this stage who fought to get $18 billion in help for our families when the banks wronged us. I'm the one who flew across the country to go toe-to-toe with Bank of America to force them to give back homes. So I am thrilled in my race to have the endorsements of Senator Kamala Harris and Senator Elizabeth Warren. And those endorsements mean the world to me, because they come from a track record of what I've done, of who I am, and of how I approach those things. Those are two amazing women leaders, and I am proud to have their endorsement in this race because they know that when I get to Washington, I will take on powerful special interests and I will fight for all of us.
That concludes the questions, and I want to thank Ann Pearson for being my timer. And Arlene Bergmeyer and Maureen Mailer for picking the questions. And don't leave, because after these few little announcements, our candidates are going to come down there and talk to you personally. So, okay. Please remember to support this club by signing up for our annual brunch on September 16, and support your county party by signing up for their Truman dinner on September 23. And our club, why are you leaving? Nobody leave. Sit. Okay. We know that our attention span here in the village is approximately 2 hours, and we're going pretty close to that. Okay, our next meeting of the club is on Wednesday, October 11, 7 o'clock, back in our usual room, Clubhouse 3, Dining Room 2. And it features the excellent video from the Orange County Registrar of Voters and Ms. Shirley Grindle, Orange County's premier political watchdog, who's going to talk about the county's Ethics Commission, which we're in desperate need of. I want to thank everybody here for turning out, for supporting the club, for supporting these candidates. And now please enjoy your talk with the candidates.